Hello, everybody. Welcome tonight to our Facebook Live. As you are joining us, I am Julie Flygar. I am the president and CEO of Project Sleep, and I'm here in Los Angeles, California, and really excited to introduce you guys to Farah Hasan. Hi, Farah.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
And where are you joining us from?
I am joining from just outside of Toronto, Ontario, a city called Mississauga.
Oh, cool. All right. So we're kind of far away, pretty far.
Yes.
And show everybody before you start your presentation. You gotta
right there.
Woo! Yeah, represent, guys. So I don't know if you guys are wearing your t-shirts today. It's 10 days till World Narcolepsy Day officially. So we're really excited, and everyone should be on brand like us. And so as you guys join tonight, please share where you are tuning in from. It's really fun to see all the different locations. Please just remember, of course, to comment, share the video to your Facebook page. All the hearts, all the likes, all that engagement is really wonderful and helpful for the video, so we can reach more people with Farah's story. And then please remember too that this video will be public and recorded. So and the comments that do go with the video will stay with the video. So you wouldn't want to share anything here that you don't want to share publicly. So just keep that in mind as you make comments. And of course, remember too that we are not giving medical advice. We are doing this for education and awareness purposes. So if anything in Farah's story tonight resonates with you and your experience, that's great. And you have questions about that, that's wonderful. Please just bring those questions to a medical professional, your narcolepsy specialist or your sleep specialist. And I'm trying to think if there's any other announcements before we get started. I mean, just lots happening for World Narcolepsy Day. So thank you guys all for ordering your t-shirts. Hopefully it looks like they've arrived to the UK. So that's very exciting. They're making it across to and Canada. So they're getting to other countries. Hopefully they'll get to everybody by World Narcolepsy Day. And thank you for those that have participated in the virtual photo booth. You guys are taking such adorable photos and gifts. And of course, come back on the 22nd. We're gonna have a session featuring different stories from around the world. So we're really excited about that. And hopefully people checked out the media training that we did last Wednesday. And that was really fantastic. Easy steps to reach out to your local news stations and share your story of narcolepsy in preparation for World Narcolepsy Day. So we're hoping to get some stories featured by the news. Last year we got 2 stories, and my goal this year is to get 5. So make sure you're doing your outreach, guys. And just thank you again for all your support of World Narcolepsy Day. It's been really special. So I think with that, Farah, do you want to go ahead and pull up your slides and I'll read your intro and we'll get going with your story?
Good.
All right. Farah Hasan lives in Ontario and is a new graduate student. Oops, sorry, lost it. In health, science, education, research. How cool. That's totally nerdy. We love it. Okay. Diagnosed with idiopathic hypersomnia at 21, she will share insights from her journey to diagnosis and treatment. As a speaker with Project Sleep's Rising Voices of Narcolepsy program, Farah hopes to demystify the symptoms of idiopathic hypersomnia and narcolepsy. So it is my huge honor tonight to introduce Farah. So go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Farah, and thank you so much, Julie, for organizing the event. To everyone who's joining in, really excited to share my story today and looking forward to answering some of your questions afterwards as well. So I was born in Toronto. I lived there with my mom, dad, and my younger sister until we moved to Mississauga, which is the city right beside Toronto, when I was 8. So I've got some pretty old pictures here, myself in front of the CN Tower, basically being a tourist in my own city. The middle picture there is myself with my younger sister who's standing in front of me. That picture is a little over 20 years old, and somehow I'd say we still manage to look like that once a week to this day. So yeah, super goofy. As a child, I was always curious. I had a passion for learning, a thirst for knowledge. I loved to read. Harry Potter very quickly became my favorite series. I'm a Gryffindor. And I really took a lot of pride in doing well in school. I loved to get involved in extracurriculars of all sorts. So everything from talent shows and book clubs to the morning announcements team. I was part of choir for a number of years as well. So every day after school in kindergarten, my babysitter, who was my best friend's mom, would pick us up and walk us home. And my friend and I would quickly wash up, and then we'd claim our spots on the floor in front of the TV just before lunch to watch our favorite TV show, which was Sailor Moon. I managed to find a really old picture there. But anyways, we'd watch the show. And then after lunch, we'd kind of play for a little bit and then watch some more TV. And nearly every day I would doze off on the couch, and my babysitter would have to come and sort of gently shake my shoulder to wake me up. And then she'd do that the first time, and then she'd come back and she'd do it again and again and again. And then eventually she would send me to the bathroom to wash, my face with cold water to try to wake myself up. And then I'd spend the rest of the afternoon desperately trying to defy the gravity acting on my eyelids. And finally, at about 6 o'clock, my mom would knock on the door back from work to pick me up and basically free me from what started to feel like this drowsy dungeon. So this extreme sleepiness persisted throughout school. I dismissed it as a consequence of staying up late, a lack of discipline, just kind of being a teenager. And in the 7th grade, as part of a kind of personal development assignment, we had to actually write a personal code of ethics. And I found this little snippet here where I wrote, "I will improve my time management skills so that I am able to get enough sleep to be alert and awake in class." And then I went on to kind of talk about how I would make sure that I started my homework on time so that I could get to bed on time, and even got down to the level of detail of saying that I needed to balance my time by actually keeping track of how long it took me to do each assignment. So as you can see, I was fairly self-critical. I internalized a lot of those struggles, even in the 7th grade, but I did what I needed to do, and I continued through high school to work hard. I wanted to maintain my reputation of what I like to call a diligent and engaged student. Some people will call that a teacher's pet, but and so I worked at it, but I did find that it started to become more difficult to keep up appearances. When I was in the 11th grade, a really strange thing happened. So one day after school, my friend and I were coming out of a Tim Hortons nearby. So for anyone, I think, tuning in from the States, I've been told Tim Hortons is kind of the Canadian equivalent of Dunkin' Donuts. So basically it's a coffee shop. So anyways, my friend and I come out of the Tim Hortons and we see a public transit bus approaching. And so we broke into a sprint trying to reach the bus stop before the bus did. And my friend, being athletic, quickly got ahead of me. And so I'm, running behind her on the sidewalk. And as we're running, I see her backpack, the zipper starts to open a little bit and her pencil case fell out. So she continues to run. I rush forward, grab her pencil case, and then keep running. And then a few feet ahead, her lunch container fell out. And then I'm about to go for that. And then I see her binders peeking out, and it's going to be the next thing to fall out. And so as I'm running, this whole thing is outrageously funny to me. It's basically the two of us running like our lives depend on it. And my friend's completely oblivious to what's happening. I'm, running behind her with my arms full of her things, shouting. And as I started to laugh, this really strange sensation set in. And my legs kind of felt like they were encased in blocks of lead. And so, I felt like I was moving in slow motion. And despite the fact that it shouldn't have really taken more than maybe 10 seconds to catch up, now I felt like I was dragging my body through a marathon. And eventually, somehow I did manage to catch up and make it onto the bus. And I was grateful that the driver had been kind enough to wait for me. And this was such a bizarre experience that I didn't really know what to think of the whole thing. I kind of just, wrote it off. But looking back, I realized that I'd had similar experiences through childhood and adolescence, particularly when playing tug of war, where I'd be pulling on the rope, but then I'd feel like I'd actually lost my grip and dropped it, even though I hadn't. So after high school, I went off to McMaster University, where I ended up doing a double major in biology and psych, neuroscience, and behavior. So basically, I'm a nerd. I was super excited about going off to university, but I did find from the beginning that it was rough. My sleepiness started to get out of hand, and no matter how interested I was in the course content, I found it was nearly impossible to keep my eyes open during lectures. I've got some examples there, but my attempts at note-taking were laughable. You can see there that my pen sort of trails off of the pages as I was drifting off, which basically turned my already messy handwriting into sort of these undecipherable glyphs. And sometimes I would actually fall asleep while writing a single word 2 or 3 times within the span of a few seconds. So, again, you can see some examples there. I think the top one says harder to find red triangles, something. The bottom one, I have absolutely no idea. And so it was always funny if anyone ever asked for my lecture notes, because I said, sure, go nuts. And if you figure out what it says, please let me know, because I had no idea what I was writing. So again, these challenges came up, but I persisted. I felt certain that, with enough scheduling and strategizing and just willpower, that I could regain control. At the time, I had my heart set on medical school and my grades were threatening that dream. And so I just kind of prayed that I would be able to get it together and bring my GPA up. And so with determination and hope, I ended up booking a date to write the MCAT in the summer after my second year. And I was completely unaware of the new hurdles that lay ahead of me. So one afternoon that summer, I was home alone studying for the MCAT, and I was sitting at my kitchen table. The sun was streaming in through the window, and I, had my biology textbook open. I've got a picture of it there, had my yellow highlighter ready to go. House was nice and quiet. Again, I was home alone. And so I started reading and scanning. And as I was reading, just very slowly, inch by inch, my face got closer and closer and closer to the page until eventually the words were out of focus. And then all of a sudden, I was listening in on this conversation between 3 people that I didn't recognize, and I could only hear their voices. So it was almost like I tuned into a radio show. And before I could really figure out what they were talking about, I came to, and my nose was just millimeters from the open textbook, and I realized that nobody was there. And so this was the point where I really understood that something was seriously wrong. I just had no idea what that might be. So when I mentioned my sleepiness to the people around me, some suggested that maybe I was stressed. Some people thought maybe I was just bored with studying. And I didn't dare to mention the fact that I was hearing things that weren't there, because there was only one highly stigmatized disorder that I knew of that could cause that kind of thing, which was schizophrenia. And I wasn't ready to confront that possibility or discuss those details with my family yet. So a couple of weeks after that sort of initial radio show episode, I ended up making a solo trip to see my family doctor. And since I hadn't told my parents or my family, I had to take public transit. So it was kind of an hour and a half each way by myself instead of kind of a 40-minute drive. And the whole way there on the bus and the train, I gave myself sort of pep talks, trying to get ready to share this information with my doctor. And despite all that rehearsal, when I was finally sitting in front of my doctor, it was still really hard to express what I was experiencing. But I eventually sort of managed to mumble it out in a haphazard kind of way. And I explained the extreme sleepiness, the difficulty staying awake and studying, and of course, the strange things that I was hearing. And that was the first time that I heard the term narcolepsy. And my doctor mentioned that it might explain what was happening. And she ended up referring me to a sleep specialist for further investigation. So the sleep specialist booked me for a sleep study. And once I did that, many of my experiences aligned with the narcolepsy diagnosis, but the results of the sleep study were inconclusive. So they required more follow-up. And so the sleep doctor booked me for a 6-month follow-up. And he asked me during that time to really commit to getting 8 hours of sleep a night and also to tracking my sleep. And at the time, my daytime naps were often longer than my nighttime sleep. So I really did have to work at it. During that observation period, there was a nagging thought that kept poking at me. And basically, I wondered if I had done this to myself. I wondered if years of having no routine, of being sleep deprived, of kind of brushing it off, might have led me to the point of hallucinating. And that was a really terrifying idea, just the possibility that this might have been preventable. So 6 months later, I returned to my sleep doctor's clinic, no noticeable differences. And so at that point, he diagnosed me with idiopathic hypersomnia at the age of 21 and prescribed me a wakefulness promoting medication. I still remember feeling emotional as I walked out of his office with a prescription in hand. Basically, finally, after years of feeling like a zombie, someone was telling me that there was treatment available. Now, despite the validation of having a sleep disorder acknowledged by my doctor, I did find throughout my journey that, I sometimes felt like my doctor wasn't really hearing me. And so given the overlap with narcolepsy symptoms, which I'll talk about in a moment, I do question my diagnosis still. So today I'll share a little bit about both diagnoses. They're both central disorders of hypersomnolence or excessive sleepiness, and both are under-recognized and misunderstood. So narcolepsy is a chronic neurological disorder that impairs the brain's ability to regulate the sleep-wake cycle. It affects 1 in 2,000 people. So that's nearly 19,000 Canadians, 200,000 Americans, and about 3 million people worldwide. Then we have idiopathic hypersomnia or IH, and that affects 1 in 20,000 people. So it's about 10 times more rare than narcolepsy is. So my current diagnosis is IH, but as I mentioned, I'm still trying to figure out if that's right. In terms of the symptoms of IH, one of them is excessive daytime sleepiness that's not eased by a full night's slumber. So excessive daytime sleepiness is basically these periods of extreme sleepiness during the day that feel comparable to how someone without narcolepsy or IH would feel after staying awake for 48 to 72 hours. So if you remember my stories about being at the babysitters or trying to get through university lectures, those would be examples of excessive daytime sleepiness. With IH, even long naps can result in feeling no better or worse upon waking up than when falling asleep. Another symptom is sleep inertia. So this is basically a transitional state that occurs just after waking where there's this really intense desire to go back to sleep. And often is associated with this kind of foggy feeling. And then there's also disrupted nighttime sleep. With narcolepsy, also several symptoms, they do vary from person to person, but they could include the excessive daytime sleepiness that we just talked about. Another symptom is cataplexy. So this is basically kind of striking sudden episodes of muscle weakness. They're usually triggered by strong emotions, so things like laughter, exhilaration, surprise, or anger. And the severity can also kind of differ. So for some people, it can be a slackening of the jaw or buckling of the knees to falling right down to the ground. The duration could be a few seconds to several minutes, and the person remains fully conscious even if they're unable to speak during the episode. So for me, if you remember, I was talking about kind of running for the bus or playing tug of war. Those would be examples of cataplexy. Another symptom would be hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. So these are visual, auditory, or tactile hallucinations that happen upon falling asleep or waking up. They can be incredibly frightening and confusing. So earlier I mentioned the auditory hallucinations that I experienced while I was studying for the MCAT. But in addition to those auditory hallucinations, I also began to have visual hallucinations after I got my IH diagnosis. So in my third year of university, I took an ancient law elective with one of my favorite profs of all time. And I'd chosen to share my condition with the prof, who was incredibly supportive and accommodating and understanding. And so, I'd always sit in the first row so that I could get a good audio recording of the lecture in case I needed to kind of listen through anything I might have slept through. And so, one day we're sitting in lecture, the prof's talking about whatever the topic was for that week. And just all of a sudden, this girl who was wearing a white sundress sitting a few seats down in the front row beside me just got up and started walking around at the front of the room. And she's just kind of, pacing back and forth right in front of the professor as he's lecturing. And I was completely dumbfounded by her actions. It was obviously disrespectful, but also incredibly distracting. And, she's pacing, and just a few moments later, she just vanished into thin air. And I realized that I had been the only person sitting in the front row, and that there had never been a girl in a white sundress to begin with. That was one of my first, and to this day, I'd say most terrifying visual hallucinations. Another symptom is sleep paralysis. So this is the inability to move for a few seconds or minutes upon falling asleep or waking up. It's often accompanied by those hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations. And it's important to know that people without narcolepsy can also experience these hallucinations and sleep paralysis. In fact, actually about 1/3 of all people do experience them at some point in time, usually during periods of high stress or poor sleep. But for people with narcolepsy, these are much more frequent and consistent over time. So I do remember experiencing this once. I'm glad I was familiar with what it was when it happened, because it would have been a whole lot scarier if I hadn't. And then there's disrupted nighttime sleep. So unlike public perceptions, people with narcolepsy do not sleep all the time. It's actually that the timing of sleepiness is off. So someone with narcolepsy might fight sleepiness during the day, but struggle to fall asleep at night. And then there are two types of narcolepsy. So there's narcolepsy with cataplexy and without. And recent research suggests that narcolepsy with cataplexy is actually caused by a lack of hypocretin, which is a key neurotransmitter in the brain that helps to sustain alertness and regulate the sleep-wake cycle. We don't know quite as much about narcolepsy without cataplexy at this time. So again, just to reiterate, my diagnosis is idiopathic hypersomnia, or IH. But as you can see, there is a lot of overlap in my symptoms with those of narcolepsy. And so again, I continue to question that diagnosis. Now, when it comes to diagnosing these conditions, it typically involves a 24-hour sleep study. And so with that, there's a nighttime portion called the polysomnogram, or PSG. And then there's a daytime nap portion that's called the multiple sleep latency test, or MSLT. And so these two components are basically used to record brainwave activity. And the diagnosis is mainly based off of how quickly and how frequently someone goes into rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep. This is also the stage of sleep where we dream. So again, it's looking at how quickly and frequently we go into those stages. And then I've just got a graph here. So this is actually from one of my own sleep studies. Basically shows that there's a lot of fragmented sleep at night. So there's currently no cure for narcolepsy or IH. There is currently one nighttime medication that was actually very recently approved for the treatment of IH, but narcolepsy medications are also used to treat it. When it comes to managing symptoms, it really varies widely from person to person, but it could include some of these things. So there are wake-promoting, histamine-directed, or stimulant medications that can increase alertness during the day. There are also nighttime medications that will improve daytime wakefulness and also reduce cataplexy. Antidepressants can also be used to reduce the occurrence of cataplexy, and then scheduled daytime naps are also found to be very effective for many people. In terms of coping strategies, also varies from person to person, but a lot of people find it helpful to get involved in social support groups, also social media groups, and then improvements in kind of general health and wellness through things like sleep hygiene, diet, and fitness. So what's worked best for me has been the wake promoting medication. And then also for a period of time, I was prescribed an antidepressant specifically for the hallucinations. So I found that effective. I eventually came off of them when I left school because I felt like I didn't need them at that time. And then the other big piece of it for me has been kind of support through counseling. I do just want to take a moment to highlight the role of counseling for me, and again, reiterate that narcolepsy and IH are not behavioral conditions. For me, what was really helpful with counseling was just kind of processing the emotions that came along with what felt to me like a loss of control. So to give you an example, naps. Many people around me really enjoy naps. They are a nice thing. Sometimes it's a way to pamper yourself. For me, for a long time, I didn't get a choice. I didn't get to decide that I wanted to take a nap. I had to take a nap. And I think that loss of control over even how I spent my free time was difficult. And so I did find that counseling was a really helpful way to sort of work through some of those feelings. So living with IH certainly required making certain adjustments. For me, a big part of this was in the context of school. So it meant taking an extra year in university to space out my courses. I ended up shifting my plans from medical school to graduate studies, registering with accessibility services so that I could get academic accommodations at school. And then really importantly, also just learning to have open, honest conversations with my professors and my supervisors about my capacity. Like I mentioned earlier, certainly there were challenges with studying. Before I learned how to manage my symptoms a little bit more effectively, I was often studying at all sorts of strange hours. I had one friend in particular, kind of in my second and third year of university, that would often accompany me. So we'd study at, again, all types of, strange hours. We were on Skype together. So we'd sort of keep each other motivated and check in. And I had many exchanges like this, but this is just one example of an exchange I had with her. So my messages are in blue, hers are in gray, but as you can see, it's complete gibberish. I have absolutely no idea what any of that is supposed to mean. I think I fell asleep shortly after I sent that last message. And then the following day, when I looked through my phone, I realized I had absolutely no recollection of sending any of those messages at all. So yeah, and as you can imagine, kind of disruptive to studying when it was sort of that type of communication. Though I did have a mix of responses from friends and family when I shared my diagnosis, some of them being less encouraging than others. I have also been incredibly fortunate to have people in my life who were just really supportive in helping me to achieve my wellness goals and taking care of myself. In the early stages of my diagnosis, I went through a pretty rough patch as a kind of a dark spot to be in. And for a couple of months, I had a friend who would call me every morning and stay on the phone to make sure that I got out of bed, I brushed my teeth, I got dressed, and I made it out the door to campus. It seems like a little thing, but it made a world of difference. And again, just something that I'm immensely grateful for. Another aspect of my life that required adjustment was work. So kind of between my fifth year and pretty much up until the end of this past summer, I worked on and off as a university recruitment officer. It was a super fun job. I got to travel across the province of Ontario, talk to high school students about our programs, And so this is a picture of me and our little mascot. I did get to fly once. We were traveling up to Northwestern Ontario, but the majority of my travel was on the road. So I would drive myself. Often I'd be hitting 3 cities in a day, visiting 3 different schools. And so I really had to learn how to take naps strategically. Sometimes it meant getting to a school early so that I could get a nap in. I'd find a parking lot nearby and just take a nap in my car. But sometimes it was kind of less convenient and a little bit annoying. I remember one time in particular, I was on my way home after a full day of visits. I'd already been driving for maybe 40 minutes, and I had kind of another 10 minutes to go before I would get home, and the sleepiness was just overwhelming. And so even though I was so close to home, I had to pull off of the highway. I found a nearby plaza, ended up napping for about 30 minutes, and then kind of carrying on. And so again, it was kind of annoying having to do that, even though I was so close to home. But that's kind of how I learned to listen to my body and kind of make those adjustments that I needed in order to be successful. So with those adjustments, I did complete my undergrad. I'm super excited. I actually just had my first week of grad school. So I'm doing a master's of science and health science education. And I was really able to celebrate after I got in. But getting through the application process was a mission. I struggled, and it started to remind me of a lot of the challenges that I faced while I was an undergrad. I worried about, how I was going to get through all of it. I questioned whether I even really stood a chance of, being successful program at all. But having to convince admission committees that I was a strong candidate kind of forced me to remember the challenges that I did manage to overcome. And so, I can kind of look at it now and acknowledge that not only did I make it through undergrad, but I graduated summa cum laude with a double major. I certainly had rough days during that application process when I didn't even know if I was going to get those applications submitted. But in the end, I was fortunate enough to get 2 offers, including my top choice. And so after all of those hurdles, knowing that someone could see beyond my transcript to acknowledge my potential to be successful just meant the world. And that's kind of how I managed to get here. So because of low awareness, even among physicians and misperceptions, there is an average of 8 to 15 years between the onset of narcolepsy symptoms and the diagnosis. And it's actually estimated that the majority of people with narcolepsy are currently undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. So some of the common misdiagnoses include things like epilepsy, depression, and schizophrenia. Part of what I've been doing to raise awareness is giving guest lectures to high school students where we talk about the neuroscience and the neurobiology of sleep, and I get to tie in pieces of my own story with IH. But I'm also excited to start using what I'm learning in my graduate courses on curriculum design and health education to hopefully come up with some new ideas on how we can sort of make complicated topics in sleep research more accessible to all types of audiences. So I'd like to kind of wrap up with a story. Not too long ago, I was at a sleep clinic with my mom for an overnight study. And that evening, as we were waiting in the reception area, we saw a little boy. He was maybe 5 or 6 years old, so about the same age that I would have been when my symptoms began. And he was dressed up in his Batman pajamas like a little superhero, getting ready for his sleep study to start. And so he stood patiently beside his mom, and I was sitting beside my own mom. And she commented on how unusual it was to see kids in this setting. And for a moment, I kind of got choked up and wasn't able to respond. And for me, it was just knowing that this little guy had someone in his life who knew enough about sleep health to raise concern and pursue medical care was inspiring. I would never know what came of his sleep study. Maybe it was a diagnosis like one of the ones we talked about today, maybe not. But it was just really uplifting to think about what a significant difference early intervention could make in his life. I pretty much went my entire childhood and adolescence without a diagnosis. So again, like that little boy, my symptoms started around the age of 5, and 16 years later, I got a diagnosis at 21. I'm 25 now, and there's still a possibility that that diagnosis could change. So today I'm sharing my story as a part of the Rising Voices of Narcolepsy. It's a program with the nonprofit organization Project Sleep that empowers patient advocates to share their stories and improve public understanding of narcolepsy. For me, it's also with the hopes that we'll be able to see more of those little superheroes getting the support that they need. So thank you so much for tuning in to listen to my story.
Yay! Great job!
Thank you.
Farah! Yay! I am clapping on behalf of many people that are tuned in, and I'm a little choked up. That was very, very, very moving. If you want to go ahead and unshare your slides so we can just see you. Perfect. Okay. Well, I just, wow. Okay. What a presentation. Just want to report back to you that we have people tuned in from Brazil, Canada, of course, Virginia, New Jersey, Florida, North Carolina, and New York. Those are the ones that people said where they were tuning in from. So people all over, and thank you guys again for tuning in. So much of what you've said has resonated with people. There's so many comments. I can't wait for you to see all of them, of all the different parts of your story that I know were touching my heart. And then it's wonderful to see other people feel the same way. So yeah, if you guys have questions for Farah, please send those over. And I know we have one question from the, we have a few questions here. And I am going to go ahead and start with a few that I have as well for you. So, I feel like what you're doing now is so cool. I feel like we could have a whole different broadcast, maybe when you're more than a week into your health science education, about all that you learn. And that's just so, so, so cool. But of course, you originally had mentioned wanting to go to med school. And I know for a lot of people with narcolepsy, sometimes there are transitions in what we want to do, or what we take on. I know I did as a law school graduate that's never practiced law. So just curious, how was that transition for you?
Yeah, I think, especially at that time, it was just all I thought about. I mean, I joke about this when I've done kind of presentations for recruitment, but I watched Grey's Anatomy like everyone else. I was like, I want to be McDreamy. I want to do all that. And, I just came into undergrad really dead set on medicine. And so kind of having to step back and reassess what I felt my capacity was, not my ability, but my capacity. It was kind of a tough pill to swallow. I think it was hard at the time, but I, now can look back and acknowledge that all of the kind of cool opportunities that came my way and the things that I got to do wouldn't have happened had I pursued that pathway. And again, I think, in the moment, it's really hard to let go of what feels like the dream. But that was all I knew at the time. I never explored anything beyond that. And so it was kind of, in a way, liberating as well, to kind of entertain other ideas. I think it let me sort of explore other passions that I kind of like tunnel visioned, kind of cut out altogether. So, yeah.
Oh boy, does that resonate with me. I also think that we don't always know. I remember thinking that there was law school, med school, or working at like in finance. That was kind of what I remember people talking about. And it's just so interesting how many more things there are to do with one's life. So yeah, and did you want to share a little bit more about the health science education program and what you will be, and how long is it? I wasn't sure. How many years is it?
Yeah, so it'll be a 2-year program, and I'm kind of like in the thesis stream. So I will be taking a few courses, but a lot of it will be kind of focusing on doing like a thesis research project. So we're still working out all the details, but it's going to be kind of focused, I think, in sort of anatomy, education, research. But with the courses, a lot of it is kind of looking at curriculum design and kind of, education and adult learners and things like that. So one of my assignments, I'm actually going to be like designing a course or a module. So my brain's really excited because I just want to take all this sleep stuff and see what I can do with that.
That is so cool. Well, we just can't wait to hear how it goes. That's so awesome. And then how has your experience been with getting accommodations in school and that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think when I first approached kind of our accessibility services office, like just all of the stigma that comes with that was just very, like, I was very aware of that. And I, didn't want anybody to know about anything. I knew I needed help, but, again, didn't want to share that with anyone. And so I remember kind of, we had midterms and some of us would sort of study up until kind of half an hour before. And then when it was time to go off to wherever we were supposed to be writing, my friends would say, okay, like, are you coming? And I'd be like, oh, you go ahead, like, I'll catch up. Because I knew I wasn't going to be writing with them. I knew I'd be writing in a separate room so that I could get accommodations. And I didn't want to tell them that. So it took a long time to feel, kind of comfortable. And I think part of the challenge for me was just, everyone has a hard time in university. And I felt like, well, everybody, needs more sleep, or everybody's tired. Everyone could have used an extension. And finally getting to the point of understanding that, it wasn't about getting some sort of advantage. It was about leveling the playing field and, understanding that difference between equity and equality. Took a long time, but I think I finally got there. And, if there is anyone who kind of finds himself in that situation, I think it's a very personal choice. But at least for me, it made a big difference. And I think I was able to do so many things, just better by being honest with myself and the people around me. Yeah.
Yeah, that is resonates a lot too. And I think somewhat along similar lines, because we talk about stigma and the stigma around getting accommodations. Danielle has asked a question here, whether or not you ever felt any stigma around taking medications or, treatments for narcolepsy. Was that any sort of an issue for you or not?
Yeah, again, I think it was one of those things where I knew I needed it, but it somehow, like, I had to overcome that feeling of like I was somehow like getting special treatment in a weird way. And I think it's funny, like, even as I, gave this talk and I processed, like, excessive daytime sleepiness, like 48 to 72 hours, feeling like you're sleep deprived, like that's not like a special advantage. That's like, whoa, like, let's level that out, right? But I think just like, again, like, even just educating myself at the beginning, I think helped to make it a little bit more comfortable. I think medication is one of those things where, just different people have different opinions about it. And I had to sort of get comfortable with what I needed. But it was certainly something that I was a bit more hesitant to get into early on.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we have a question from Elizabeth, changing directions a little bit. Elizabeth asks, you have discussed about your early cataplexy episodes did you discuss the cataplexy episodes, and do you still think that you have episodes that are consistent with cataplexy, and wondering if you caught any of it on video, and would just be really interested to know how your doctor responded. So a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So nothing on video. And for me, the cataplexy is very subtle. And actually I'd be curious, like, I never thought to ask my friend that I ran after the bus with about whether she remembers if anything was weird. But like, the tug of war thing that I mentioned, I think it would have been imperceptible to anybody else. It was just like I felt like I was not able to hold it. I know I had a couple of times where I'd be laughing and I felt like I was about to drop something, but I never dropped it. So again, it's always been really, really subtle things. Yeah. And cataplexy, I don't know. It's not a symptom I experience often. Like, I think those episodes have been kind of relatively few. But they do still pop up from time to time. I think that's a big part of like this question for me and trying to understand like what actually is my diagnosis. Yeah, so I don't know. I'll have to try representing some of those ideas to my doctor.
Well, your experience is unfortunately very common. And I'm sure you know this, but just for anyone else that doesn't, the, the MSLT, the daytime sleep test is not a perfect, measure. And there's things that can make the results be off sort of. And especially with narcolepsy type 2 and idiopathic hypersomnia, people often go between the two diagnoses, and that's very confusing for people as your sense of identity gets attached to a name of a condition one way or the other, and then it changes. But your experience didn't change, and regardless, your experience is very real and valid. So just a note for anyone that it might be in any sort of experience like that, unfortunately, hopefully there will be changes in the future in how we can diagnose narcolepsy and IH, and more biomarkers and things to look for and all that. So let's see, I'm sure we have some more questions here. There are lots of great comments. Emma would like to know, when you have given talks to kids in school, how have you found their awareness of sleep disorders and narcolepsy and IH in particular?
Yeah. I don't think very many people knew of it at all. I think a lot of people, like when it comes to sleep disorders in general, I think a lot of the time insomnia and sleep apnea are ones that people are more familiar with. So it was really interesting talking about these. And, one of the things we do is sort of like this kind of case study where like I disguise myself as a case, and then we're like, oh, what do you think is going on? And a lot of people are like, oh, well, I wonder if it's depression, right? Or schizophrenia. So I think the awareness of, IH and narcolepsy is quite low, but it was amazing going through the whole lecture and seeing just how much everyone kind of absorbed and like thought about it. So yeah, I think part of it is just a matter of like getting out there and talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing that. And I see here, Alyssa would like us to know that you are a prepared speech champion of all sorts.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Yeah, you have some great friends and supporters on here. And we have a few more questions. Let's see. So Danielle has asked about whether your doctor has mentioned about micro sleeps, little episodes of sleep. And how have you experienced any of that?
Yeah, so I think the like lecture notes was definitely the example that comes to mind. And I remember just being a little astounded by, like I'd be writing out a single word, and like I'd write the first few letters and then I'd kind of doze off, and then I'd write the middle few letters and then doze off, and then the end. So yeah, again, my notes made absolutely no sense, but like those like incredibly brief periods of sleep. Yeah, I definitely experienced a lot of that. I think it'll be interesting now that I'm shifting back into school because I was working. But now, I've got a ton of papers to read, and I definitely notice those kinds of symptoms come up more when I'm, kind of sedentary and reading or writing. So, yep, micro sleeps. Oh, yes.
Your visuals of your presentation and all the things that you have. I know many people were saying, wow, like those text messages and those, handwriting. I know I experienced a lot of that myself, but I don't have, I don't think I have any of my college like books where I would scribble nonsense. So it's just such a power. And the thing all the way back from your childhood of saying that you would prioritize sleep at such a young age.
Yeah.
Glad that you saved all these things,
Yeah. Useful examples.
Yes, come in handy. And then Sarah would like to know if there are any support groups for people who share your condition.
Yeah. And actually maybe Julie, you'd be the better person to talk about this. Truth be told, until I joined Rising Voices of Narcolepsy, I'd never really looked at support groups. And now that I'm kind of joining this community, like it's incredible. Like just even getting to talk to other trainees in the program, like the level of support has been phenomenal. So I haven't actually joined any groups. I've just made some lovely friends who, thank you to those of you who are there, because I'm hearing your names. But yeah, maybe Julie, you could kind of highlight some, because I'm not as familiar, truthfully.
Yeah, so there are right now, I think some, obviously because of the pandemic, there's a lot of opportunities online. And so Wake Up Narcolepsy is an organization that's hosting a lot of different support groups, and they do have one now specific to Canadians. So so there is a support group for people in Canada. They also have a generalist one. They have one about pregnancy and parenting, one for LGBTQ community. So they have a few different, they have great offerings. So that's Wake Up Narcolepsy for anyone that is not familiar. And they have online support groups. There's also Narcolepsy Network, and they do have some support groups as well online. And then of course, back in the good old days, we did have in-person support groups, which I loved attending. I didn't like the word support group. I thought that had stigma to me. I thought that was like, oh, I don't need support, but I found that it was information gathering. And I gathered so much valuable information from other people. So I'm really grateful for all those opportunities. And I still learn every day from, the advocates like Farah, sorry, sharing your story on these broadcasts as well. So yeah, and really quickly just want to give a shout out to Lauren, our program manager, who has been running a lot of Rising Voices this summer and really worked very closely with Farah on her presentation this summer, and our other advocates. So just quick shout out to Lauren for all of her hard work to prepare all of our speakers. She's doing such a great job. I feel so lucky to have her as a colleague. Let's see. Okay, one more question from Kim. She says, I have IH and my daughter was diagnosed at 11 and now she's 17, and I'm trying really hard to encourage her to advocate for herself. Any suggestions for helping her with that?
Wow, good question. I think like self-advocacy was like, at least for me, a big learning curve. I think, a lot of the time it's easier to kind of encourage someone else to get help. And we're often so good at doing that, right? We have friends and family and, we stand up for them. I think, at least for me, a lot of learning self-advocacy in part was having conversations with people that were close, that I trusted and felt safe with, who helped me to realize that I also deserved that. And I think part of it was just sort of, again, like, I think a lot of the ability to self-advocate came from getting support. And I think it's easy to feel knocked down sometimes when you do talk to people who don't understand, or sometimes are just unwilling to try. I think that's a part of it too. And so, I think, I don't know, my unsolicited advice would just be kind of encouraging and supporting, and sort of giving, I guess, her or anyone that confidence to, to build themselves up and kind of work at it. I don't know if that makes sense. Good luck.
Definitely. And just thank you. I always like to thank mothers. And I mean, I know it looks like Kim also has IH, but supporting your daughter's experience is so powerful. And also having IH, you know what it's like. Yeah. So just really being there for your daughters is so important. So all right, I think that's it for questions. There's just so many great comments, so I can't wait for you to see all those. And just a reminder, folks, to please share this video to your Facebook pages if you can, which will help us reach many more people, because all of you have lots of friends and colleagues, and we have an award-winning prepared speech speaker tonight who has just, totally touched my heart, and I won't forget so much of what you said tonight. It'll honestly be hard to choose one quote for us to share on socials, because so much of what you said is so powerful. So I don't know if you had anything else, any last takeaways that you wanted to share before we head out?
Honestly, just wanting to thank everyone. I know I, kind of told a lot of people about it, and I truly would not be doing this exact thing today if it hadn't been for every one of those people. It's incredible, all of their little pieces of support and love and kindness. I'm gonna stop talking before I start crying, but thank you. It really means the world.
Oh, well, thank you, Farah, and thank you everyone for tuning in. And this was just such a great way to celebrate the 10-day countdown until World Narcolepsy Day. So please tonight, as your 10-down countdown, share the video and we'll see you guys again soon. So have a good night, get some good rest. I hope your second week of school is awesome tomorrow.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, Monday, that's right. Yep.
All right, good night. Bye, everybody.